The Red Sea at 2:11 on a Thursday in January has weather that the watch brief describes as operationally acceptable, and that every sailor standing in exposed deck watch describes as something considerably less complimentary. 1.8-meter swells from the northwest, 14-knot wind, overcast ceiling at approximately 600 feet. The kind of night where the horizon is a rumor, and the only reliable reference is the ship's own motion. A slow, rhythmic pitch and roll that the body learns to compensate for unconsciously after the first 2 weeks of deployment, and that never becomes comfortable in any objective sense. USS Mason had been on Red Sea patrol for 17 days. 17 days is long enough for the watch rotation to develop a collective opinion about the galley's overnight meal options, an opinion that had, by day 17, achieved the consensus negativity of a jury that has been deliberating too long and arrived at a verdict that nobody on the jury liked, but everyone agreed was unanimous. The coffee in the Combat Information Center had been brewed at 0:30 and had, in the 91 minutes since completed its transition from an approximation of a warm beverage to a demonstration of the properties of room temperature liquid. The tactical action officer had consumed approximately half of it without apparent pleasure, and was maintaining the second half as a kind of psychological anchor, something warm in the hand, even when warmth was no longer a property it possessed. The second-class petty officer at the surface search radar console had consumed none of it. Having identified the source early and exercised restraint that his watchmates noted and respected, with the particular respect reserved for people who make better decisions under fatigue than the rest of the watch. The officer of the deck was on the bridge wing despite the wind, because the bridge wing, even in January Red Sea weather, was more interesting than the bridge interior at 2:11 on day 17 of a patrol. An interest had a certain operational value at this specific hour that no amount of wind chill fully negated. The forward Phalanx CIWS, the Mark 15 Block 1B close-in weapon system mounted on USS Mason's forecastle, one of the ship's 2 final layer defensive systems, had been taken offline at 23:45 for a scheduled maintenance cycle. The maintenance had been in the operations plan for 6 days, coordinated to fall during the lowest probability threat window, which historically was the post-midnight hours on weekdays when Houthi operational tempo ran at its lowest sustained level. The decision was sound. It had been reviewed, logged with the task group, and confirmed appropriate. The after-Phalanx on the ship's fantail remained fully operational. USS Mason was not without close-in defensive capability, but it was operating with one of its 2 final layer systems offline, with a return-to-service timeline of approximately 3 hours, and with the reasonable institutional expectation that 2:11 on a Thursday wasn't the moment that expectation would be tested. The surface search radar picture at 2:11 showed 47 contacts, merchant traffic on the southern transit lane, dhows in the coastal fishing zone to the east, a Greek tanker outbound at 11 knots, 2 ROK Navy vessels on patrol station 22 miles to the south. The radar operator had been maintaining the picture for an hour and 40 minutes and had developed the working familiarity with every contact that long watch rotations produce. The passive knowledge of their tracks, speeds, bearing rates, the background layer beneath the active attention the job requires. He was, at 2:11, maintaining the surface picture with practiced competence while thinking about whether the galley's breakfast rotation would include anything describable as food, before his watch ended at 400. At 2:13, 4 new contacts appeared simultaneously in the eastern sector. The contacts did not develop gradually from the clutter margin, the way a distant ship resolves as range closes. They emerged from behind a cluster of DAO contacts at a range of 11 nautical miles, close enough that their initial appearance already carried the specific quality of something that had been moving for some time before the radar geometry permitted acquisition. The radar operator's attention sharpened with the snap of someone whose background processing has registered a discrepancy before the conscious assessment has fully formed. He looked at the tracks. He looked at the speeds. 22 knots, bearing 265. In a loose diamond formation approximately 400 meters across. No AIS transponder. Signals. No navigation lights in the electro-optical sensor return from the eastern bearing. He keyed the tactical net at 2:13:47. Teo, surface search. 4 new contacts, bearing 094. Range 11 nautical miles. Speed 22 knots. Course 265. Formation pattern. No AIS. No nav lights acquired. Assess. Surface USV. The tactical action officer was at his console in 4 seconds. He looked at the contact picture. He looked at the formation geometry. He looked at the speed. 4 contacts, no lights, no AIS, 22 knots, bearing directly toward USS Mason at 11 miles. He had his working classification before the formal process completed, and the working classification was the one the formation geometry, speed, and absence of any legitimate maritime identity marker pointed to without ambiguity. General quarters, he said. Not dramatically. As a decision, made by someone whose job description includes making that decision and who had just reached the threshold. General quarters at 2:14. The alarm brought the ship to battle stations the way a year of drills produces. Not chaotically, but with the focused urgency of practiced response. Here is where the maintenance schedule produced its specific shape. With the forward phalanx offline, USS Mason's close-in defensive geometry against surface contacts had a documented coverage gap. The forward phalanx covers the bow and forward beam sectors. The approach arcs a contact on bearing 094 is using. The after-Phalanx covers the stern and aft beam. For a contact approaching from directly ahead, bringing the after-Phalanx to bear requires the ship to present its stern. A maneuver imposing a navigation constraint and requiring approximately 90 seconds from maneuver order to a clean sector. 90 seconds. The contacts were 11 miles out and closing at 22 knots. Time to the outer defensive perimeter, approximately 21 minutes. Time to close in engagement range, approximately 17 minutes. The numbers were not crisis numbers. They were numbers requiring a maneuver decision, made now, before the geometry narrowed further. The commanding officer reached the bridge at 2:16. He received the picture in the compressed efficiency of a handover, practiced for exactly this situation. He made the maneuver decision in approximately 20 seconds. USS Mason came to course 094. Richatari Naumsley. Tuar. Washatari Nabaniais Churig. The check blacks and increased speed to 20 knots. Coming toward the contacts concentrates them into a forward arc the after-Phalanx can cover without excessive ship maneuver, and it puts the MK-45 5-inch gun into geometry where it can engage surface contacts at range. The 5-inch gun had an engagement solution on the lead contact at 2:17. Before the response sequence makes the threat academic, the Houthi maritime unmanned surface vehicle deserves an accurate description. The 4 contacts approaching from the east were constructed around commercially available fiberglass boat hulls, modified with propulsion capable of the 22 knots they were demonstrating, and loaded in their bow sections with warheads derived from the same Iranian-supplied architecture that the Houthi movement applies to its one-way air vehicles. Each vehicle weighed approximately 300 kilograms. The guidance system combined GPS waypoint navigation with a video camera in the terminal phase, feeding to a shore operator who would steer the vehicle to its aim point. The video feed ran on a commercial 5.8 GHz link. Simple. Cheap. The 4 vehicles together represented approximately $120,000. Hull material, propulsion, warhead components, guidance electronics, operational overhead. They were an asymmetric maritime capability built from off-the-shelf components by people who had studied the problem and solved it within their resource constraints. This channel acknowledges the ingenuity. It does not change what happens next. The video feed was the detail the SLQ-32 had been waiting for since the contacts appeared on scope. At 2:15, 68 seconds after the initial contact report, the SLQ-32 detected 4 simultaneous transmissions on 5.8 GHz, bearing 094, signal strength consistent with a range of approximately 11 miles. 4 transmissions, 4 contacts, same bearing. The SLQ-32 operator had the frequency, modulation type, and specific channel allocation within the 5.8 GHz band in his collection log within 30 seconds of detection. The channel allocation was the first piece of genuinely new intelligence. Previous Houthi USV operations monitored in the theater had used a different channel allocation within the same frequency band. suggesting either a deliberate frequency management update or a different production batch of guidance electronics. New channel allocation, documented. New modulation characteristics, documented. Both entered the threat library before the engagement sequence was complete, because the SLQ-32 does not pause collection to wait for the tactical picture to resolve. The Mk-45 5-inch gun engaged the lead contact at 0219 at a range of 8.3 nautical miles. The 5-inch gun fires a projectile at approximately 2,800 feet per second, a round that travels 8 miles in approximately 15 seconds and applies to a 300-kilogram fiberglass hull, an engineering reality that the hull's designers had not engineered it to survive, and which no amount of asymmetric ingenuity changes. The lead contact was rendered inoperable at 2:19:22. The watch log noted the engagement with the clinical precision of a crew doing what it was trained to do. The second contact was engaged at 2:20:11. The third at 2:21 and 3 seconds. Each engagement was logged. Each was confirmed. The surface search radar updated its picture after each resolution. 3 contacts down, 1 remaining. The 5-inch gun returned to ready status. The tactical picture showed the 4th contact continuing on its modified bearing. The video link dark. GPS navigation, carrying it toward a waypoint that USS Mason had already moved away from. At 2:21:43, the SLQ-32 operator reported a contact change. The 4th contact's video feed transmission had gone dark. The 5.8 GHz signal had ceased. Approximately 40 seconds before the contact reached the after-Phalanx's outer engagement envelope. The 4th contact continued moving at reduced speed on a modified course. 18 degrees of bearing change, suggesting either a waypoint navigation fault or terminal guidance failure, following the operator's video link loss. A 300-kilogram warhead navigating on GPS waypoints without operator correction is not a sophisticated problem. It is also not zero, because GPS navigation will carry a vehicle to its last programmed waypoint, regardless of what has happened to the link. The after-Phalanx engaged the 4th contact at 2:22:19 at a range of approximately 1 nautical mile. The Phalanx CIWS fires 20mm tungsten penetrators at 4,500 rounds per minute, guided by its own fire control radar, requiring no human input once activated. From acquisition to engagement to confirmation, 11.3 seconds. The 4th contact was rendered inoperable at 2:22:30. The surface search radar picture was clear. USS Mason resumed base course at 02:24. Total elapsed time from initial contact acquisition to the final engagement: 9 minutes and 17 seconds. The forward Phalanx had been offline the entire time. The after-Phalanx was used once. The 5-inch gun 3 times. The maneuver to course 094 had shaped the geometry, and the geometry had produced exactly what it was designed to produce. The intelligence picture from this engagement deserves its full accounting. 9 minutes of Houthi USV operation near a U.S. electronic warfare suite produced a collection package of genuine operational value. The 5.8 GHz video link characterization was the primary product, and it was more complete than any previous USV collection in the theater. The new channel allocation documented here represented the 3rd distinct configuration observed in Houthi USV operations, a progression that the intelligence cells analysis characterized as consistent with deliberate counter-detection management, meaning the Houthi technical team was systematically varying their frequency allocation to complicate U.S. detection and jamming responses. The progression was now documented across 3 events with specific parameters and told the collection team something about the rate at which the Houthi technical program was updating its electronic architecture. The modulation characteristics produced a specific finding. The 4th contact's guidance system used a slightly different error correction protocol from the other 3. An earlier generation of the same commercial electronics architecture, indicating a different production batch. 4 vehicles in 1 operation, 2 electronics generations. This is a logistics indicator. It tells the intelligence cell whether the Houthi USV program's supply chain is uniform or opportunistic. The cell's assessment filed 2 days after the engagement, consistent with an opportunistic supply chain drawing on multiple commercial sources rather than a single controlled production run. Operationally significant for future detection planning. The fourth contact's video link interruption at approximately 1 nautical mile produced the most structurally interesting finding of the package. The link loss at that range was not jamming. It was the passive electromagnetic environment of a modern warship at close proximity, overwhelming a civilian-grade transmitter operating at portable power levels. The ship's own background radiation, the unavoidable electromagnetic byproduct of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer's normal operation, had been louder than the Houthi guidance link at 1 mile. The intelligence cell noted this under the heading Organic Countermeasure, a defensive effect that required no deliberate activation and cost the U.S. Navy precisely nothing. The fourth contact had lost its operator's eyes because it had approached close enough to a U.S. destroyer that the destroyer's existence was the countermeasure. This was filed, documented, and added to the USV engagement doctrine recommendations the Fifth Fleet staff was developing. The EW operator aboard USS Mason, who had been collecting continuously since 2:15, transmitted his initial collection summary at 2:34, 4 minutes after the engagement concluded. He had not stopped collecting during the engagement itself, because the SLQ-32 does not require human instruction to maintain collection once a contact is on scope. He had been running his primary task and his secondary task simultaneously, which is what electronic warfare operators do, and which is why the collection summary was ready before the watch secured from general quarters. The executive officer, reviewing the summary in the CIC, read the new channel allocation entry, looked at the 2 electronics generation entries, and said something that the electronic warfare operator would later describe to his division officer as a compliment with context. The collection went to 5th Fleet on Link 16 before 0300. The 3 new threat library entries were distributed to every U.S. Navy surface combatant in the theater before the morning brief. The money picture has a specific character in this engagement. 4 Houthi USVs at approximately $120,000 total hardware cost. Operational overhead, launch crew, shore control station, mission planning, perhaps $15,000. Total Houthi investment, approximately $135,000. USS Mason's engagement cost. 3 5-inch rounds at approximately $1,400 each. $4,200. After-Phalanx ammunition, approximately 800 rounds at negligible per-round cost, roughly $400. Battle stations overhead for 37 minutes, approximately $18,000 in ship operating cost. Intelligence processing for the SLQ-32 collection package, $95,000 in analyst time, over 48 hours. Total direct U.S. cost, approximately $120,000. The Houthi movement had spent $135,000 to force the United States to spend $120,000. On a pure cost exchange spreadsheet, this is the closest the Red Sea theater has produced to a break-even engagement. The spreadsheet, however, does not include the intelligence collection value. Adding the collection equivalence assessment of $2.1 million shifts the final accounting back to the direction it normally runs. The Houthi program had donated its current frequency allocation, its electronics generation profile, its supply chain architecture, and the specific range at which its video guidance link fails near a U.S. destroyer, all for $135,000, and the operational result of 4 fiberglass hulls at the bottom of the Red Sea. Somewhere in the Fifth Fleet budget office, an analyst was cautiously optimistic about the cost-exchange ratio. That optimism would not survive contact with the SLQ-32 processing invoice, which arrived the following Tuesday. The officer of the deck secured from general quarters at 2:51. The officer of the deck also noted, in the watch log, that the after-action report would take considerably longer to write than the 9 minutes and 17 seconds the engagement had occupied, which was a consistent feature of naval operations that the documentation requirement never seemed to account for in any naval instruction he had encountered. The forward Phalanx maintenance cycle resumed at 2:53 and completed at 4:19, returning the system to fully operational status approximately 1 hour after it would have been available had the engagement not interrupted the schedule. The engineering maintenance officer filed the maintenance completion log at 4:21. He noted the return to service time and the interruption duration. He did not editorialize. The log format does not accommodate editorializing, and he was not the editorializing type. He signed the log. He found the coffee. He reconsidered the coffee. He found the coffee anyway, because 4:21 on a Thursday morning in the Red Sea is not the hour for principles about beverage quality. He drank it standing at the hatch. It tasted exactly like the maintenance cycle had felt. He went back to check the Phalanx's operational certification one more time. The way maintenance officers do when a system has been offline during an engagement and they want the certification to be correct in their own personal files, independent of the official log. It was correct. He filed his copy. Oh, he went below. Houthi media published the operation's official account the following morning. The broadcast described a precision maritime engagement by the naval forces of the Yemeni Armed Forces against an American vessel conducting aggressive operations in Yemeni sovereign waters. A demonstration nollied. Parisher technical capability and operational readiness, conducted despite intensive American surveillance, proving that American monitoring cannot prevent Yemen's defensive responses. The footage showed USVs depart in a coastline at speed. Night footage, genuinely dramatic. The kind of visual that small, fast boats in the dark reliably produce. The departure was documented. The arrival was not. Some operations have better footage from the first act than the last. The 3 new threat library entries distributed by 8:15 on Thursday morning covered a new frequency allocation, 2 electronics generations in a single 4-vehicle formation, and the organic electromagnetic countermeasure range finding. Every U.S. Navy surface combatant in the theater received all 3 before the morning watch brief. The next time a Houthi USV approaches a U.S. Navy vessel, the frequency allocation data will be in the detection planning, and the electromagnetic countermeasure range will be in the ship's defensive positioning doctrine. The Houthi technical team will update their electronics. When they do, the new allocation will also be collected, characterized, and distributed. The library grows with every engagement. The broadcast grows with every announcement. One of those products updates the fleet. The other updates the narrative. The fleet's product lasts longer. Bye for now.